dynamic duo last week. Leslie and Ann Hood, what a combination, right? So next week we're going to have Wellfleet historian Irene Payne, who is with us this evening, as a matter of fact, right over there. And she will tell the story of her great aunt, Eve, who is married to Sea Captain Henry in the late 1880s. Largely, this will be a chronicle of Wellfleet and life on the Cape at that time, as well as the love between these two people. Miss Payne was recommended to me by a member here, Doug Payson, and this is a good way to segue into saying if you all have suggestions, you know a good speaker, you've read a good book, you want to know more about a certain subject, let me know. Tonight, I'd like to thank a few people, Tit Combs especially, for bringing the books that you can buy. And Gail Alexander for her treats. And our sponsors, Nancy and Charlie Mueller. Perry Wentworth. And the Barnstable Market that supplied us with the wine. So, he likes that. Okay. So tonight's esteemed guest, Casey Sherman, was born and raised in Hyannis, attended Barnstable High School, and graduated from Freiburg Academy and Boston University. This is how I get around the Tales of Cape Cod. So he's from Cape Cod. So as a young TV news producer, he led a high-profile reinvestigation of his aunt's murder, which later became a book entitled Rose for Mary. If you haven't read it, it's excellent. I recommend it. In 2009, he co-authored The Finest Hours with another one of our favorite speakers, Michael Tukas. As we all know, that book was developed into a major motion pictures with Disney productions with Chris Pine, Casey Affleck, and others, and was filmed largely on Cape Cod. Am I right about that?
That's right.
Okay. So Casey is the best-selling, critically acclaimed author of many other books, notable books. Boston Strong, which was developed into the movie Patriot Games. 12, which is about Tom Brady, and I'm waiting for that film. Starring, I don't know.
Yeah. Could be Tom Brady.
Yeah, it could be. Above and Beyond, The Last Days of John Lennon, Hunting Whitey at Helltown, which we have here, among other books. So Casey's latest bestseller, A Murder in Hollywood, has been called, quote, a wild ride beneath the glitz and glamour of 1950s Hollywood. And Casey has been called, quote, the master of the genre. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to introduce Casey Sherman.
Big round of applause for Ann here. Thank you so much. She does so much incredible work just, on this program, throughout the year. And it's really amazing, all the work that you do. And I'm extremely happy to be here tonight because this is the end of my national book tour for A Murder in Hollywood. And it's great to come home and tell this story. The book tour began in early February. I launched the book in LA, and then over the course of several months have visited major cities around the country, have signed and sold thousands of books. This book right now is the #1 USA Today true crime thriller of 2024. Thank you. And as Ann mentioned, oftentimes I write stories that are parochial, that are regional. This was a little out of my comfort zone, and I liked it. After I wrote Helltown, and I don't know if any of you have read it, but it's a very, thank you. It's about a serial murder case that happened here on Cape Cod back in 1969. And, that book did incredibly well, not only across the country, but around the world. And after that book had been published and gained that success, my agent said, well, you got to write something that's as big as Helltown. And we kicked around some ideas, and he did send me probably 10 news articles about so-called unsolved murders or mysteries around the country and around the world. And he sent me a Time magazine article, just one page long, about Lana Turner. Now, what drew me, is that my phone? Sorry, guys. Oh, it's my daughter. No, okay. Actually, that was a phone call from a prisoner who I'm doing a book about right now. I'll have to call him tomorrow. True story. It's my world, and my wife has to live it with me, so I apologize, Kristen. She's in the back of the book, back of the room here. But we talked a little bit about Lana Turner, and I knew about Lana. I knew this story, and I'm glad you guys are all here tonight, because when I speak to audiences, my daughter's age, and she's about 25, I have to say, well, Lana was like the Taylor Swift of the 1940s and 1950s. It's great that, many folks here in this room probably remember Lana, if not, Lana's career. And I told my agent, I said, well, this has been written about ad nauseum for 50 years. But if I can bring something new to this story, I'm all in. I said, give me 2 weeks. And it didn't take me 2 weeks. It took me about 2 days. And I called him back. I said, I'm already putting the pieces together, and this is an incredible story. Now, Lana Turner has been looked at, by historians for 60 years, almost like the characters of her films, a femme fatale, kind of a villainess in Hollywood history. But after the research that I did for this book, I have a different view of Lana, and I hope you'll have that view tonight as well. She's not a femme fatale, she's a feminist icon, and I'm about to tell you why. Lana Turner arrived in Hollywood, and this is what she saw. The sign Hollywood Land. Now, those of you who may not know much about Hollywood history, the Hollywood sign was actually a real estate sign, to sell parcels of real estate in the Hollywood Hills, and eventually land left, and they just kept the Hollywood sign. Well, Lana was a child, and she was basically born into darkness a little bit. Her father was the victim of an unsolved murder when she was a kid. Growing up in the Great Depression, she didn't have any money, and her dad wanted to buy her a bicycle for her birthday. And he got into a card game in San Francisco. He won, but he didn't make it out alive. Those who he fleeced in that card game beat him up, stole his bankroll, and killed him. His killer was never found. But here is young Lana and her mother Mildred without anybody to really support them. So they left San Francisco and they hitched a ride literally to Hollywood Boulevard. And it wasn't out of any dream to be a Hollywood star. Lana actually, had no ideas of being an actor or an actress. She enjoyed fashion. She wanted to be a fashion designer and potentially get into the industry that way. She enrolled at Hollywood High School, and if you've ever been to Hollywood, it's about 1 block from Hollywood Boulevard. And when she was a teenager, she was discovered at a malt shop in Hollywood, and it became the biggest discovery story in Hollywood history. Lana was sitting down having a Coke, not a milkshake, and a Hollywood talent agent discovered her and launched her career. And when that story made the press, it was almost like a Cinderella story, if you will. But instead, it's much darker when you really drill down and think about it. The man that discovered her his name was Billy Wilkerson. He was the founder of Hollywood, the Hollywood Reporter. He was in his 40s, happily married, but he used to skip out of his office for lunch every day at noon to go to this malt shop, which was right across the street from Hollywood High School. And he did so just to ogle and seduce underage girls. So Lana was 15 when she was so-called discovered by Hollywood. Wilkerson gave her a card and told her, get your mother to call me, and they didn't really know much about it, but they did. It was exciting to them, and Wilkerson connected Lana and her mother, and Lana wasn't Lana at that time. Her name was Judy Jean Turner. She had to come up with the name Lana Turner because obviously it sounded very exotic. Her first agent was Zeppo Marx, one of the Marx brothers. And Zeppo asked her, "How old are you?" And Lana said, I'm 15, sir. And he said, "Don't ever say that again. In Hollywood, you're 18. So Lana had to grow up at that very moment. And she was cast in her first film, and where she was described and called the Sweater Girl, because they put her, but she had matured much earlier than her age. And they put her in tight-fitting clothes, and the director told her to walk down, one side of the set to the other. And they would film her, therefore kind of sexualizing her at a young age. And not only did the studio MGM do that on screen, but they also did that off screen as well. Now imagine you've got a 15-year-old daughter, and somebody comes up to you and says, "All right, tonight we're going to take your 15-year-old and we're going to put her on a date with a 30-year-old." That's exactly what the studio did for Lana. So they put her on the arm of every potential leading man that they had, including a future president, Ronald Reagan. Now think about it. 15-year-old girl, being forced to go out with a 28, 30-year-old person. Nowadays, that person would be drummed out of Hollywood. But, back then it was just the studio, running their usual business. And it's interesting because MGM really was the family-friendly studio in Hollywood at the time. And here they are, they're really robbing a lot of their, young child actors of their innocence. And this happened, in the 1930s. It's still happening today in Hollywood, which is a very sad thing to think about. Lana's first film after the Sweater Girl experience was with co-starred Artie Shaw. Artie Shaw was a very well-known band leader in the 1930s and 1940s, and when I have a younger audience, I said, that's the Ed Sheeran of the 1930s and 1940s. And they kind of get that. Well, Lana falls for this much older man. She's 19 at that time, and a 19-year-old girl under the Hollywood studio contract can't just date anybody. If you fall in love at 19, you've got to get married. And when people ask me, well, Lana was married 7 times, I said, there's a reason for that. It was all in her contract. She had a morality clause. Every female actor in Hollywood had a morality clause, unlike every male actor that didn't have a morality clause. Well, this relationship and marriage ends disastrously for Lana. Artie is abusive, and you'll read about what he did to her in the book. And it really kind of started Lana's string of bad relationships and bad marriages. I mentioned the 7 marriages that she had. Everybody that came into her life, and remember, Lana didn't have a father figure. She was always looking for somebody that would take care of her. And every person that got into her life said, I'm going to take care of you, Lana. But they didn't. Instead, they took care of themselves. They took advantage of her physically, psychologically, certainly financially as well. And one of the things that really struck me about this story was, again, going back to the studio and how the studio really handcuffed its young female actors at the time. Lana had been dating a young African-American jazz singer in New York City, and that sparked an investigation by the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover himself was writing dossiers to Louis B. Mayer, who was the chairman of MGM, talking about this so-called illicit relationship. And Lana almost lost her job because she couldn't love who she wanted to love in the 1930s and 1940s. And there was this weird symbiotic relationship between the Justice Department and the FBI and Hollywood. Lana was incredibly influential not only, triggering trips from every young actress who had 50 cents to her name who could get a bus ticket and go to Hollywood and sit on that stool hoping to be discovered. She also influenced Evita Peron and Marilyn Monroe. Evita dyed her hair platinum blonde just to look like Lana Turner. And when Lana was coming up in Hollywood, Lana had a rival, Joan Crawford. And as you can imagine, reading about Joan or seeing Joan's movies, Joan wasn't going to give up that throne easily. Joan was ready for a fight with Lana. And Lana ultimately wrestled the title, Queen of Hollywood from Joan. But as Lana started to get a little older, here comes Marilyn Monroe. And what I found, very endearing about Lana is that she took Marilyn under her wing, and she really mentored her. And they shared, several letters together. And Lana gave her some tough critiques about the way she looked and how she had to dye her hair, thus platinum blonde, icon that Marilyn Monroe became. But without Lana Turner, there really wouldn't be a Marilyn Monroe. This is the most iconic film in Lana Turner's career. The Postman Always Rings Twice. It is an incredible film noir, co-starring John Garfield, who subsequently was blacklisted and had a very tragic ending to his life. This was a tumultuous movie because the director was drunk on the set, all the time. And what I like about the picture I'm showing you here, Lana is dressed in all white. Now, originally, as you can imagine, she's wearing skimpy clothes, and the director wanted to show off her figure, but the Hollywood Censor Bureau wouldn't allow it. Now, the original costumes were made in black or made in red. And once Lana screen tested those, the Censor Bureau said, no, you cannot put her on screen, wearing those skimpy outfits. So the director said, well, we're just going to put her in angelic white. And that's what he got her through the censors. The censors were like, oh, no, that's fine. She looks like an angel. This is another figure in Hollywood history that you'll be reading about or hearing about in A Murder in Hollywood. His name is Mickey Cohen. And right there you see the godfather of Los Angeles. And as I was mentioning to my agent, once he told me about the story of Lana, I said, I'm a sucker for LA film noir or LA noir books, whether it's Dashiell Hammett or Raymond Chandler or James Cain or even LA Confidential. If I can add something to that LA crime canon and a bibliography, I'm certainly happy to do it. And one thing I found out about Mickey Cohen is that his career paralleled Lana's. They were both young, growing up in Hollywood, and as Lana is going from studio to studio, Mickey Cohen is robbing, gambling dens and nightclubs throughout Hollywood. And he was a real kind of wild child. And the mob saw something in Mickey, and they sent Mickey to finishing school under Al Capone in Chicago. And ultimately, Mickey made his way to New York, got in some trouble there, and then was sent back to L.A. under the tutelage of Bugsy Siegel. Now, you'll read a lot about Bugsy in the book as well. One of the things I always thought interesting about, this story is Hollywood in the 1930s and 1940s and even 50s was a place where, you had organized crime or disorganized crime, and you had a blossoming movie industry. And so that any given time at a nightclub or a dinner party, you'd see Bugsy Siegel on one end of the room and Clark Gable on the other. These worlds blended in a weird way, and they were, helping each other, or I would say, lifting each other in the industry itself. That's the next picture of Bugsy Siegel, right there. If you've seen the movie Bugsy, you know what happens to Bugsy Siegel. He tried to take over the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, and he skimmed a lot of money off of the top, away from his friends. And he was gunned down in Beverly Hills at a rented mansion that Virginia Hill had rented. His best friend, Mickey Cohen, knew this was going to happen, didn't do anything to stop it. He really couldn't. But also saw this as an opportunity to take over the rackets in Hollywood, which is what Mickey did. Hollywood in the 1940s and 50s was very violent. Doing the research on this book, guys, I spent a lot of time in Hollywood. Getting the primary source documentation that led me to the book, but also walking the grid and walking down Sunset Boulevard and some of these other places that look much different now. Some of them don't. Some of them look the same. And I was shocked at the violence that was right out there in the open in the 1940s and 1950s, where a block away you had, Humphrey Bogart, filming a movie about mobsters, and a block away you had actually had a shootout between real mobsters. So as I said, it was a town that was really small. LA today is much bigger, but back in the 40s and 50s, Hollywood was a very, very tiny place. Well, at one point, these two photos are Mickey Cohen surviving a gangland slaying at Sherry's, which is on the Sunset Strip, and then his house in Brentwood, California, was bombed. And he actually lived right around the corner from where O.J. Simpson would eventually live as well. But Mickey is somebody that has 9 lives, but he does get arrested for tax evasion, which is what his hero Al Capone went away for. And Mickey went away for a little while as well. But when Mickey emerged from prison, he didn't want to live by the knife or by the gun anymore. Instead, he wanted to, make money as a criminal, because that's who he was, but in a kind of a non-violent way. So he came up with a plan. And his plan was to extort many of Hollywood's most powerful figures, put them in compromising positions, and then blackmail them for all that they were worth. Two of Mickey Cohen's biggest targets were Lana Turner and Janet Leigh. Now, Janet Leigh, who I think had fended off Alfred Hitchcock by that time, was not privy or didn't fall easily into, Mickey's web. In fact, she pushed him off and got away. But Lana was, again, naive, somebody that was looking for love, and she thought she had found it in this man, Johnny Stompanato. Now, Johnny Stompanato, if you've seen the movie L.A. Confidential, Johnny Stompanato is in one of the scenes where one of the characters gets a glass of, I think it's wine, thrown in his face by the real Lana Turner. Johnny Stompanato is an interesting, dark character. He grew up in the Midwest, was a combat veteran in World War II, fought through all of the Japanese islands, killed the enemy with his bare hands. Made his way back to the Midwest, but he had wanderlust, and he thought that California was the place he ought to be. So he blackmailed a young, rich British man and secured passage and airfare to Hollywood. And when Stompanato got there, he became a gigolo, and he started to extort, men and women, people like Merv Griffin, people like Liberace. He would seduce them, put them into compromising positions, and take their money. Because again, in the 1950s and 40s, those guys couldn't love who they wanted to love. So Mickey and Johnny took full advantage of that. Now, people always ask me, how did Lana and Johnny meet? I can tell you, they didn't meet at a book club. They didn't meet at a coffee shop. This was an exploitation and an extortion plot. Whereas Lana, who was getting a little older as an actor and still trying to cling on to her Hollywood fame, was getting, swooned by this young, very handsome man in Johnny Stompanato. He didn't call himself Johnny Stompanato because he'd already been in the press as a gangster and a thug. Instead, he called himself John Steele. And remember, this was before the internet, so Lana couldn't Google this guy. Lana believed everything he told her, and probably wanted to believe it, but all of the meals that he would send to Lana's dressing room, and all of the albums from her favorite artists that he would send to Lana's dressing room, those were all bankrolled by Mickey Cohen, because they thought, we have a mark here. And for those of you who don't know what a mark is, it's somebody that's very vulnerable, who has a lot of money, who can easily be persuaded to give that money during the right circumstances. And they really focused on Lana because in the 1950s, as I mentioned, Marilyn Monroe was the upcoming film star. And Lana was aging out in Hollywood. And by that I mean she was only 37 years old. But she was only now starting to be offered matronly roles. You're going to be the aunt. You're going to be the grandmother. You're going to be the mother. And MGM fires Lana. So Lana, for the first time in her Hollywood career, doesn't have a studio to back her up. And at that point, she could have done anything. She could have, retreated into hiding. Her career could have been over. But what I really respected about Lana at that point was that she said, no, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to start my own production company. Now, that's not big news today. That was huge news in 1957 because no actor, especially a female actor, created their own production company. There was only one at that time, Desilu Productions, and that was Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. Lana didn't have a Desi Arnaz. She just had herself and her boyfriend, Johnny Steele. Eventually, she learned that he was Johnny Stompanato, a reformed gangster. But Johnny showed her immediately that he wasn't reformed. Johnny was incredibly violent and began to abuse Lana physically. That was something Lana was used to in many of her relationships. And people will ask me, well, why didn't Lana just go to the police? Because restraining orders didn't exist in 1957 and 1958. Had she taken her bruises to the Beverly Hills Police Department, they would have told her to go home and settle it because domestic violence wasn't spoken about in polite society. So Lana had to withstand this very violent, enraged boyfriend and tried to break it off with him several times. And when she couldn't, she decided that I got to get away from Johnny. So what she did is she made her first film, which is a movie called Another Time, Another Place. There we go. These are photos of Lana and Johnny being squired around Hollywood. Johnny would call the paparazzi to meet them at every restaurant they ever showed up at. Lana looks like she's smiling. She looks like she's in love with Johnny. She's not. By this point in the relationship, she's had it. She's got makeup that's covering her bruises. And then the emotional trauma that Johnny, gave her is something that she tried to hide. She tried to hide that from her friends. She tried to hide that from her 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane. This is the film that Lana was making when she wanted to break away from Johnny. Another Time, Another Place. The film takes place in England. She could have made this on a Hollywood studio lot, but she knew that Johnny didn't have a passport. So she took her whole production to England and hired a young Scottish actor as her co-star. Now that Scottish actor, as you know by looking at him, that's Sean Connery. This is Sean Connery's first film. And their chemistry on screen is explosive. And all of the Hollywood gossip columnists began to pick up on chatter on set that maybe Lana and Mr. Connery are having an affair. Well, those stories get back to Hollywood, and they're printed in the Hollywood gossip rags of the day. And who's reading them? Johnny Stompanato. Johnny, as you can imagine, doesn't like what he's reading. He goes ballistic. But he doesn't have a passport, so he gets Mickey Cohen to forge him one, and then he gets a gun. And somehow he gets through security, because nobody really checked in the 1950s, and makes his way to England where firearms are illegal. In fact, police officers can't even carry them, and shows up on set just as Lana and Sean have just finished a kissing scene, and they're walking off the set, but they're laughing and they're cordial, and it didn't look like there was any romantic thing happening between Lana and Sean, but Johnny, doesn't see that. Johnny confronts them. Johnny screams at Lana and almost beats her up right on the set. And then he makes a really bad mistake for Johnny. He puts a gun and sticks it in Sean Connery's ribs. And at that point, Sean Connery became James Bond. Sean Connery beat the hell out of Johnny Stompanato on the set of that movie. And police were called, and Johnny was deported, and Lana hoped that she would never see Johnny again. Lana wraps the movie, that means finishing the movie, and wants to celebrate. She's just made her first movie as a producer. So she decides to book a vacation for herself to Acapulco. What she doesn't realize is that Johnny's there, waiting for her. And Johnny confronts her, says, "I'll never do that again, sweetheart." And Johnny almost killed her in England. She knows he's lying, but the only way to get Johnny from not beating her again is just to kind of submit to Johnny, physically and emotionally. Am I hitting the right? There we go. I went too far? All right, thank you. There we go. So these are photographs, guys, of the vacation. Don't they look like they're in love? Johnny looks like he's in love, but Lana is petrified. Lana probably, right before that photo was taken, was beaten for about an hour. And as I said, she just had to submit to this guy. And she eventually did and was able to survive that vacation, about a month-long vacation. And then one thing, finally something good happens to Lana Turner. She gets a call from her agent, and her agent says, "Lana, you've just been nominated for Best Actress for your role as a mother in Peyton Place." Now, Lana had never been considered a good actress, even an average actress. She had always been kind of laughed at by her peers. But now here was validation, right, from her peers saying that she was a great actor. And so she had to cut that vacation short, and she ultimately ended up back in LA to prepare for the 1958 Academy Awards. Got this thing. There we go. This is an iconic photograph of the three people I'm really going to start talking about here. It's Lana, Johnny, and Cheryl Crane. Cheryl is Lana's teenage daughter. Now, this photograph was taken at the Burbank airport when they landed from Acapulco. Lana didn't call the press. That was Johnny. Johnny wanted to make sure that every publicist and every cameraman in Hollywood knew that Lana was hers. And when Johnny would turn his back on the reporters, Lana would whisper in their ear, "I'm not with him. We're only friends." Johnny didn't know about it at the time, but he read about it, and he went crazy. And he subjected her to more physical abuse. And finally, Johnny said, "Well, you're not going to the Oscars in 1958 without me." And Lana said, "Oh, yes, I am, because I'm a producer now, and you're a gangster. If I'm going to, get people to invest in my films, we really can't be seen together, Johnny." So Lana decides to take instead her mother Mildred and her daughter Cheryl to the Academy Awards in 1958. That's her entering the Academy Awards. It's the greatest single night in her professional career. She doesn't win Best Supporting Actress or Best Actress. She doesn't have to. Now she's being celebrated with Jimmy Stewart and with all of the huge major actors of the day and really, standing firm on their level. And they loved her. And it was a night where Lana and Cheryl danced the night away at all the Hollywood balls. They had the greatest night of their lives. Thank you for your patience, guys. One more time here. Yep, there we go. I skipped it again. There they are. So you've got Lana with all of the major stars, including Cary Grant, and you can see how happy that Cheryl is. Cheryl's incredibly happy. But when Lana gets back to her rented Beverly Hills bungalow that night, she puts Cheryl to bed because Cheryl's got classes the next day. She goes into her bedroom. In the darkness, there's one guy waiting for her, and it's Johnny Stompanato. And Johnny's outraged. And Johnny continues to beat Lana for several hours. In fact, Cheryl is, hearing all the abuse from the other room and wondering, do I call police? Well, if I call police, Johnny's going to kill everybody. So she doesn't. And the next morning, Lana covers up her bruises because she knows how to do that now. But before Johnny leaves after just, beating her senseless, he makes a fatal mistake for Johnny Stompanato. He says, if you do this again, I'm going to kill you. Well, Lana's heard that before. But I'm also going to kill your mother, and I'm going to kill your kid. Now, at that moment, a light goes off, I think, in Lana's brain. And Lana says, no, this is not going to happen. One of us is going to leave this earth, and it's not going to be me. So fast forward just a couple weeks, Lana moves into this home, 730 North Bedford Drive in Beverly Hills. Beautiful place. The house still stands today. You can drive by it if you're ever out in LA and want to do a kind of a creepy, macabre tour. The first thing that Lana buys when she rents this house, I thought was very peculiar. She didn't buy a television, which was a big deal at the time. Didn't buy a stereo system. She bought a knife. Now, I hate to say this about Lana, but Lana wasn't a great cook. Lana didn't know where her kitchen was. Lana always ordered out or had a private chef. But to notice that the first thing she does is go to a cutlery store in Beverly Hills to arm herself with a knife because she knew Johnny would get mad again. And when Johnny got mad, Johnny got violent. And this time, she had to defend herself. And this is what happens. Good Friday, 1958. Johnny Stompanato is stabbed to death on the bedroom floor of Lana's bedroom at North Bedford Drive in Beverly Hills. That's one of the crime scene photos. This is, just moments after police arrived. Is there anything that stands out that's a little odd to anybody here? You can shout out your answer, that's fine. No blood. Thank you. Now, a stabbing in the abdomen, for those of you who know law enforcement or maybe have a history in law enforcement, it's a very bloody wound. The fact that Johnny looks like he'd been placed there by a Hollywood prop master. And that is what I think because Lana stabbed Johnny, killed him, and then Lana makes a phone call. Now, she didn't call police. Instead, she called her lawyer, Jerry Giesler. Now, Jerry Giesler was the Johnny Cochran of the 1950s, or I should say Johnny was the Jerry Giesler of the 1990s. When any celebrity got in trouble, the battle cry was, "Get me Giesler." When Errol Flynn was arrested for seducing underage girls or molesting underage girls, the battle cry was, "Get me Giesler." When Robert Mitchum was arrested for pot possession, the battle line was, "Get me Giesler." So Lana calls the lawyer. The lawyer shows up well over probably 2 hours before police eventually arrived, and he has to digest the crime scene and come up with an alternative very quickly. Lana tells him about all of the abuse that Johnny has subjected her to over the past year. Now, Giesler's thinking right away, well, that's premeditation. You stabbed him because he'd been abusing you. You could go to jail for the rest of your life on a capital murder charge, but also, Lana, the death penalty is still very much alive in California. And who is going to take care of your 14-year-old daughter if you're in jail or if you're, in the electric chair or the gas chamber? And then I think he brought 14-year-old Cheryl in the room. And he said, "Cheryl, this is what we're going to do. I can get justifiable homicide if you're holding that knife. If you come in, break up a fight between Johnny and your mother, prosecutors, jury members, they're going to be empathetic and sympathetic to what you've gone through. You're a kid. These people probably have daughters or nieces of their own." So they get their story straight. They call Beverly Hills Police. Now, had they called the LAPD, the case would have unfolded much differently. But Beverly Hills cops were like the Eddie Murphy Beverly Hills cops that you see. Not a lot of experience investigating homicides. And when they get there, they hear this incredible celebrated lawyer tell them what happened, and they don't think too much about it. It's kind of hook, line, and sinker for them. And remember that, Johnny's a gangster. He's not a judge or a doctor or somebody, an upstanding person in society. Somebody was going to kill Johnny Stompanato. So it might as well have been Lana's 14-year-old daughter. The police bought it, allegedly. Nobody else in Hollywood did, especially Mickey Cohen. Mickey Cohen believed that Lana Turner had stabbed Johnny Stompanato. There's another. Look at that carpet. That's a beautiful carpet right there. It's just amazing. That is Johnny exiting the scene, as they say in Hollywood, and that is the long knife wound in his stomach, which would have obviously caused all that blood. Cheryl Crane was brought to juvenile hall. Now, this was a roll of the dice for Jerry Giesler and Lana, because, as much as Jerry Giesler figured out that he could do this, everything had to break right in this case. So poor Cheryl gets thrown in jail the night of the murder, and Lana almost, I think, confessed at that time just to get her out. But Giesler said, listen to me, and let's go with the plan I have. And they did. Again, this is Mickey Cohen observing Johnny Stompanato's body. Because Johnny had been a combat vet from World War II, he got a full military honored funeral that Mickey Cohen paid for. And no one could believe that a 14-year-old girl could sneak up on a hardened combat veteran who had killed many times before and kill him the way that people alleged that Cheryl had done. But Lana Turner had to tell her story, or at least Jerry Giesler's version of the story, at a coroner's inquest, which was really kind of a one-day trial for Lana Turner. And you can see she performed brilliantly. As good as she is in The Postman Always Rings Twice, she's better here. And what I've read through the court transcripts and some of the photos I've seen, she keeps looking over to Jerry, almost like she's looking back at her director. Did I get my lines right? Did I get my lines right? And certainly, everybody or at least law enforcement was able to kind of say, okay, you made it through the gauntlet, you're free, and Cheryl ended up getting out of juvenile hall as well. So it all kind of ended well for Lana and Cheryl to a degree. But Mickey Cohen wasn't done yet. Mickey Cohen was out for revenge, and he was going to kill Lana. So he sent his gangsters all over Hollywood looking for Lana Turner, and they had knives, they had guns, they also had bottles of acid. Because if they confronted her, they were going to throw that acid in her face. And if it didn't kill her, it was going to disfigure her and ruin her career. Mickey Cohen also released several torrid love letters between Johnny and Lana to the press to embarrass her. And then he got the Stompanato family to file a wrongful death suit against Lana Turner. Now, we all know these wrongful death suits. You go to civil court, and that's where an attorney can prove whether or not you're responsible for a criminal act. And therefore, it might even open up criminal charges for you down the line. So the Stompanatos, through Mickey Cohen's help, they get a really talented lawyer in L.A. Several months go by, and Lana and Cheryl are brought in for depositions. Well, now their stories aren't adding up. And Lana's kind of forgotten her lines over the past few months, and the lawyer says, we got her. At trial, we're going to expose her as the killer of Johnny Stompanato. And therefore, ultimately, she's going to go to prison if the federal prosecutors or city prosecutors jump in. So what course could Lana take? Just one. She could, if she was innocent, she would have gone to that trial. She wasn't. Instead, she settled the case out of court. And, and again, I don't like to use the word innocent or guilty when it comes to Lana Turner, because I do think she was put in a corner and she had to defend herself and save her family and save her daughter. And that's what she did. At the end of the book, I wanted a moment in time to, really capture, Lana as a survivor. And that's what I think she is. As I mentioned earlier in my talk, she's not a femme fatale, she's a feminist icon. She is a pioneer of the Me Too movement. Everything that Lana Turner went through and survived years, decades before some of the actors of today have, finally come forward. Lana was able to withstand that and had to take actions into her own hands. So this photo was a year after the crime, or after the killing of Johnny Stompanato, where Lana has been called a femme fatale, Cheryl has been called a murderer and a killer, and Lana gets a screen role that eventually becomes her most financially rewarding screen role of her career. And here they are at the premiere, and they're not called femme fatales or killers, they're being applauded. And they're being swooned as, the reigning queen or the re-emerging queen of Hollywood and the Hollywood princess in Cheryl. And I thought that was just a beautiful way to end this story, at least on the page. Now, the mother and daughter did have, as you can imagine, a pretty difficult relationship over the next several decades. Cheryl had run away from home several times. Cheryl wrote a book on her own when she was an adult called Detour. And Detour is a very heart-wrenching book about growing up the daughter of Lana Turner, or really the parent of Lana, because Lana wasn't a great parent or a mother herself and fully admitted it. But again, Lana had lost her innocence when she was 15, and she wasn't a child herself. And in the book, Cheryl maintains responsibility for killing Johnny Stompanato, and people ask me why. I said, well, there's no statute of limitation on murder. At any time in Lana's life, Lana could have been arrested and brought up on capital murder charges had Cheryl, I think, told the real story. But Lana survives and outlasts all of her enemies. Johnny Stompanato, he's 6 feet under. Mickey Cohen, karma's a bitch, and Mickey gets what's coming to him. He was arrested for murder years later and then beaten in prison and didn't last very long after that. But remember, Lana acted into the 1980s. She was on Love Boat. She was on Falcon Crest. She won the day, and I thought, what a beautiful, finale to this story. I remember trying to reach out to Cheryl, prior to writing this book. Cheryl was obviously much older, and I think she had several health problems. I didn't get any response from her. But I can just imagine her thinking, well, here comes somebody who's just going to take my mother's memory and, bring it right through the mud like everybody else had done. Once I found out what this story really was, I couldn't go that route. I had to go the route of truth and the route of eventual justice and, really elevate Lana to what I think is her rightful position as I mentioned, a feminist icon. And that is the story of a murder in Hollywood. Thank you. I'll open it up to a few questions, and then I'll sign some books if anybody wants to buy them. Yes, you in the front.
Did Lana's daughter ever admit that her mother had done it after Lana died?
No, she didn't do that, and I think there were a couple reasons for that. She had already written on the page that she took responsibility, and I love for the fact that Cheryl ended up writing a kind of a dime store novel called The Killer Always Rings Twice. And she leaned into her infamy a little bit, and I love that about her because I thought, God, she can finally have a little fun with this after going through all the torture and torment that she'd gone through. But, Cheryl as an adult ended up in a long-term relationship, had a great life for herself. So fortunately, and I hope that she found some kind of peace and happiness for herself. Yes?
How do you know that the story you told is true and the others were not? I mean, what don't you need to say, this is how it happened?
Because when you take everything that's been written, nobody looked at it from a 30,000-foot view and then drilled down. You've never heard the story of Mickey Cohen's extortion plot. Now, I learned that Lana had been drugged and put into a bed with a female and filmed by Johnny Stompanato. She found that film later. Several other so-called witnesses came forward who claimed that they were in the bedroom that night cleaning up after Lana's mess. So, it's my job as an investigative journalist and as a writer to piece together, some of the things that I think make sense Now, I go back, my career as an investigative journalist, 25 years. I've covered, well over 100 homicides. I know what I see when I see it. And, this story is, in my opinion, much more plausible than the 14-year-old sticking a knife in Johnny Stompanato. The motivation people, never really understood, that Lana had to protect herself and to protect her family. And I think really what tipped it for me was the wrongful death suit. If Lana was innocent, she would have gone to court, just like she did for the inquiry. She didn't. She paid Johnny Stampanato's family a boatload of money. Yes?
Who was Cheryl's father?
Stephen Crane. So he was a nightclub owner in Hollywood at the time. And again, one of these guys that just took advantage of Lana. When he first introduced himself to Lana, he said he was the heir to a tobacco fortune in the Midwest. And Lana, handsome young guy, very well dressed. Certainly she fed into that. But, during, one of her nationwide tours, she asked Stephen to bring her back to his hometown so she could see the opulence that he had grown up in, because she certainly didn't. By tobacco fortune, it was a pool hall on a side street in a podunk town in the Midwest. He had no money and took advantage of Lana physically and financially, but ultimately in the 1950s, somehow he became a restaurateur and nightclub operator in Hollywood. Yes?
Did you interview some of the other actors in Hollywood who worked with her to understand more about her personal life?
That's a great question, and I did talk to a few people that knew Lana and knew her, when she was much older. Everybody that was connected to this case is long gone. But people that, in Hollywood who had worked on, say, Falcon Crest or another project that Lana had worked on, they all, were just in awe of this icon, in the old, glory days of Hollywood. But Lana, was also somebody that was impetuous and made a lot of bad decisions in her life. When I wrote the book, I felt like I was her big brother. And I would say, Lana, don't do this. I know you're going to make a bad decision here. You're already in it. So now we got to figure out how you're going to get out of it. Again, somebody that I think who lost her innocence very early. And what I didn't, talk about tonight was the Hollywood system in the 1930s. You look at Judy Garland, you look at Mickey Rooney. Judy and Lana were hooked on amphetamines at 13, 14 years old to work 70-hour work weeks to crank out this family-friendly, fare for the studios. We know what happened to Judy. She died in her 40s after a long history with drugs and alcohol. I don't blame Judy Garland for that. I blame Louis B. Mayer for that. He did that to her when she was just a child. And that's what they tried to do to Lana, but again, Lana survived. Yes? Oh, he passed before I got the project. I would have loved to have talked to Sean Connery about it. But Sean did write a little bit about it in his memoir. And, when you're going over primary source documentation, you get, some of the crime scene reports. But also, for me, I was fortunate to have Lana tell her own story on the page, to have Sean Connery, write his own story as well. So you get bits and pieces, and then you have to, put it together like a jigsaw puzzle. I will say this book is now in development as not only a feature film, but also a documentary. Thank you. My partner on the documentary side he's out with a new documentary this week called Faye, which is about Faye Dunaway. And my partner on the scripted side is Terrence Winter. And Terrence created Boardwalk Empire for HBO. He was one of the lead creators of The Sopranos and earned an Oscar nomination for Wolf of Wall Street. So, when you surround yourself with super talent, good things happen. And I think on the feature side, we're waiting for a real dynamic female director because we want that point of view. We want the empowerment part of this story told, and not just the, there was a stabbing of a gangster and, let's, cue the music and call Lana, a villain again. She's not, in my opinion. And she won't be on the big screen, I hope. Yes?
What's your next book?
Thank you. I try to write and publish a book a year. I've got a book coming out next April. It's called Blood in the Water, and it's about an alleged murder on the high seas in 2016 where a young man on the spectrum took his mother out on a deep-sea fishing trip off Rhode Island. The boat goes down. She disappears. He's a castaway on a life raft for almost a week, allegedly. And when the story broke, I'm sure you all remember, it was kind of a bittersweet tale of a young man who survived days at sea, but he lost his mother. But when they took him back to the Coast Guard station in Boston, they began to pick through his story, and his story didn't add up. He was drifting in the opposite direction of where he should have been drifting when the boat went down. So he became the prime suspect in his mother's disappearance and ultimate murder. And then they also found out that he was the prime suspect in his grandfather's shotgun murder 3 years prior, all in the effort to seize a $50 million family fortune. It makes the Murdaughs in South Carolina look like a bunch of amateurs. Really does. But I will leave you with this. I went into that case, reading everything that I could read, but once you get to the primary source documents, and I interviewed 30 witnesses in that case. He may have been innocent. And I'm going to leave you with that because he can't tell his own tale. He died in jail before his trial last year. But I weigh all of the evidence and I present that to you, the reader. And there are days that I wake up and think, there's no way he could have done this. Then there are days that I wake up and think, what a criminal mastermind he must have been. But what I kept on coming back to was the lack of understanding of people with, on the autism spectrum. I interviewed the lead FBI investigator in that case. And I asked her, I said, well, did you consult anybody as an expert in terms of how Nathan Carmen, which was his name, how he thinks? Well, we were going to get to that. We did our own profile of Nathan. I said, yeah, but you didn't do it with an expert. Then I said, you're going to get to that. You investigated this kid for 4 years, and he died in prison. And you were going to get to that before the trial? I am convinced, despite his guilt or innocence in the case, that he would have been acquitted at trial. And it's interesting, now that the Karen Reed case has brought up so many questions about, handling of these cases. The Karen Reed case is an anomaly. It happens quite a bit. And now we're seeing it, unfold in courtrooms, not only here in New England, but across America. One more? Yep. The stab wound did bleed. It bled for quite some time. It was cleaned up before police got there. People that in transcripts that I've read talk about witnesses being in the room saying that they had to wipe down all of the walls. The walls were glistening with, soapy water when police got there. And Johnny Stompanato's clothes had been put into a trunk and later burned. So this was a crime scene that was cleaned up incredibly well before law enforcement got there. And they didn't look, too closely at, blood spatter or anything else that the residue that CSI investigators would immediately see today, that wasn't picked up in 1958. All right, one more and then we'll, all right, one more. There you go.
Did Lana Turner ever get a long-term relationship that brought her any happiness?
God, I hope so. She had, again, more relationships. She was single when she died. I think she had just sworn off, all men entirely by the time she passed. But, she was in and out of relationships, I think, for the rest of her life. And she was a very difficult person to deal with. She was Lana Turner, and she let you know it. So you can only imagine, even if it was somebody that was trying to treat her well, probably ran for the hills because he couldn't take it any longer. But like I said, she survived. A whole new generation of readers are learning about Lana Turner really for the first time. And they're not just getting all of the misinformation or misguided information of who she may have been. I'm trying to tell the world who she was. So thank you.